Much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I know long 2 days, very exciting, and this is an interesting topic where we're going to touch upon financial inclusion. We're also looking at the future for financial inclusion for the next billion from an international perspective. I have a pleasure of having a very distinguished panel with me, and I will let them introduce themselves, starting with Sajan. Please, if you could go ahead.
Thank you, Mushar. What an experience. It's been the second day and it feels like I've been here for a week. Such a great engagement. So again, my name is Sajan. I'm the founder CEO of CityTech. We're in the business of payment acquiring, merchant acquisition, and payment orchestration in Nepal. In addition, I'm also the president and one of the founding members of Fintech Alliance Nepal. And I'm here with our entire delegation. Almost 50 people from Nepal are here. So
welcome, thank you. Jacqueline?
I'm Jacqueline Tai, and thank you for inviting me to join this session. I'm currently the honorary chairperson of Taiwan Fintech Association. I'm also a co-founder of a law firm specialized in tech law. I was minister in Taiwan in charge of digital policies.
Sure, go for it, yeah.
I request the people who are standing here, please do not make much noise. The session is going on. I request everybody to please remain silent. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Please continue. Thank you.
Please, Jacqueline, continue. Yeah.
Okay. Because I had ever worked in the public sector, so for those issues, most of the fintech companies facing challenges from policies and regulations. So that's my current missions to assist fintech industries in Taiwan to deal with policies and regulations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Manoj?
Yeah, I am Mannoj Varma from Lyra Network. Lyra is a payment solutions company. We create solutions for merchants, banks, and fintechs. One of the significant achievements that we have done very recently is to launch UPI at Eiffel Tower. We have done a very big government-to-government engagement between India and France, and successfully we have implemented UPI in France, and also at Galeries Lafayette very recently. Yeah.
Flying the flag high during the Olympics, right? A gold medal for us here. Look, it's a theme that I think fintech has identified with for a long time in terms of financial inclusion. When you look at the initial stages of look at fintech, M-Pesa in Kenya was one of the initial stories, and then we had the conversation of how technology can enable financial inclusion. So we've had a few billion people enabled by financial inclusion, but financial inclusion for different people means different things, right? So we'd love to get your perspective. How are you defining financial inclusion? Maybe we'll start with you, Manoj, and we'll come from there. Yeah.
So for us, from India perspective, if you see financial inclusion is one of the important aspect here in India. If you see a few years back, people were not aware of financial products. Availability was not there. But in last 5 years, if you see, we have significant growth of financial product and financial services, especially in the rural India. These services were always available in the metros and urban areas, but rural and urban, the divide was huge, few years back. But in the last 5 years, due to multiple factors, we can see that this bridge is almost over. And the contributing factors are, mobile penetration, the availability of the hardware, mobile, and the telecom operator has also played a very key role. Especially for me, emergence of Jio was, one of the significant factor for, reducing this gap. Because if you see pre-Jio era, it was metered, data was metered.
Correct. Yeah.
And so, even in metros and urban areas, it was very difficult to, access internet. So there was cost to internet. Now, there is no cost almost. We have one of the lowest tariff rates for availability of, calls and data. So because of this, the availability is there and affordability is also there. Because of this now, it is available, internet is available almost with everybody in the country. And many companies, fintechs, non-fintechs, have emerged and have created solutions on this internet rail.
Yeah.
The financial products are getting delivered. You can also see the content. Content industry has actually, 1000x, now. This is only because of, the emergence and, the railway, the track that has got created because of the internet. If you see the growth of YouTube, growth of, ad industry, digital ad industry is also because of this factor.
Yeah, data has been a key player for that.
Yeah. So it has been the key player. And India, in the rural India especially, there are two kind of people, attended service delivery and unattended service delivery.
Okay.
So in India, we have a lot of youth also and a lot of people who are in the later age group. So for later age group, they like more of an attended kind of services, and many companies have started doing that. In fact, Lyra has worked on one project with Postal Department of India, and in that project, 130,000 POS machines was deployed with attended, branch officers, and they delivered the services, digital services, including the postal service plus the financial services to the rural India, doorstep delivery. This has helped, give a lot of penetration there. In fact, one interesting factor that we saw during this entire thing, they were also able to sell a lot of postal life insurance through this segment, which was one of the, big factor and the new thing, the insurance thing. And using this doorstep and the technology, they were able to also sell the postal life insurance.
Okay.
And yes, of course, the young guys are more, independent. They want to do it-yourself kind of stuff, which is always available. And every company is now, have given both the features. You visit the branch and you can take the service, or without the branch also you can take the service. So these are the factors I would say have contributed financial inclusion both in urban and rural area in India.
Yeah, it's a mix of two different ways of approaching it. Jacqueline, how are you defining financial inclusion, and how have you seen that develop in Taiwan and East Asia broadly, if you want to cover that? Yeah.
Situation in Taiwan, because most of you may be aware that Taiwan is quite specialized in tech.
Yeah.
So there are many technology companies in Taiwan. So I would say people in Taiwan, they get used to use so-called tech devices and tech tools to support themselves or to do business. So my observation of so-called the financial inclusion in Taiwan, I would say because most of the financial system is more support business, because we are highly depending on export, and manufacturing is our core industries. So most of the companies, they need more so-called financial funding from the current financial systems. So most of the traditional FI, I would say supporting manufacturing industries is more profit. Okay. So industry customer is, more profitable than so-called the consumer business.
Sure.
So relatively, the financial institution in Taiwan is relatively more conservative to some extent, because they need to provide stable financial services to support our core industries. And therefore, when they comes up so-called the digital payment, they comes up P2P, they comes up blockchain, crypto, these individual, they're willing to use those kind of new financial services. So that's in Taiwan, fintech really so-called to provide a more affordable and more accessible services for especially for the young generation. But
Okay.
this one thing, that's my observation, because my specialty is tech law. So there is a so-called the digital divide. When we are adopting new technology,
Yeah.
and it's getting more and more people, they may facing so-called, it's just quick, they cannot catch up. So some of them maybe drop out because of the new tech, especially for the senior people. They are worried about maybe the scam, the fraud, so they are not willing to use, or they are lack of knowledges. So, well, that's my observation. I think in Taiwan, digital divide is one of the serious issues our government should deal with.
Okay, that's an interesting look at how financial inclusion, not just about the financial services, but access to technology, and the level of access to technology also makes a big difference, even in developed economies per se. Sajjan, your views on financial inclusion and how you've seen that develop or reduce if there were in cases of financial exclusion in Nepal?
So I'll break that question in two parts. So from a first part, let's talk about financial inclusion as a textbook definition of it, right? So
Sure.
if you look at the stats, in Nepal, we have about over 60% of the population has access to bank account. Now, if you consider that inclusion in our GDP category, if we compare to countries like Bangladesh, Cambodia, with per capita GDP comparable to Nepal, we are actually better off than them. So their numbers are around 50%, we're actually at 60%. But if you ask me what a financial inclusion is, it's not so much a destination, it's more of a journey, right? So getting people on board into the financial fabric is not the challenge. You come up with a pandemic like COVID or a very strong cashback scheme from a wallet operator, it's relatively easy to get people on board. But the trick is, how do you create an ecosystem where inclusion is also measured in terms of evolution, right? So how do you get people into the financial fabric and have a system that is robust enough to kind of cater to their evolving needs as they move up that ladder, right? So I think financial inclusion, if you ask me, it's not so much a destination, it's a journey, and it's so much easier to get those numbers up by forcefully opening accounts. But if you truly measure their engagement level within the financial ecosystem, that's how you're going to actually get the inclusive society.
Yeah, I think step one when we talk about financial inclusion is getting access. And we saw that even in India with the Jan Dhan accounts, 50 crores, 500 million to transfer in different numerics. And that's first step, people having a bank account. And the next step becomes, how do you enable and use public services? I'm based in Hong Kong, and what I've seen there is there's very high penetration of banking. Maybe each person has at least 2 or 3 bank accounts, a high ATM penetration. But when it comes to SMEs, there are always a lot of challenges for access to credit. Access to even basic bank accounts is a challenge, especially if you're fintechs dealing with any major financial services. That becomes a problem, as is credit, right? So some of the challenges were seen by the government and regulators, and they dealt with it, as we've seen here. I want to get your perspectives on what were, in your views, in the last, say, 5 years, the key challenges to taking financial inclusion from, lack of a better terminology, phase 1.0 to 2.0, right? Like next step from access, but next is utility of those services. In your regions, what have you seen? Mannoj, maybe if you want to talk about, I know you spoke about what Lyra have done with the POS machines. It's part of that 1 to 2, but what else are you seeing from a country perspective broadly for us to go from 1 to 2 for all financial services? Yeah.
So my perspective on this is, on the individual level, we can see a lot of penetration and financial inclusion that has happened. But at the SME level, we are still a lot of work needs to happen. In fact, significant work needs to happen. The seamless flow of money, be it between small businesses to another small business, or the credit side of it, especially on the SME side, we need more, work on that side today. So that is one of the, that can actually take this entire financial inclusion to the next level. This is what we can say. And on the individual side, we see looks okay. Also, I want to just touch upon, about the capital market also. So in India, after the COVID era, and this was never seen, this is again a kind of inclusion, So, most of the people now in India are also doing, capital market, investing in capital market. And that is one of the main reasons that we see a lot of stability in the markets here in India. And largely in earlier days, whenever there is an impact in international market, we have a similar impact here in Indian market. But this we are not seeing now. We see the Indian capital market is mostly stable all the time, and there is no huge fluctuation. This is only because the participants here in India, the retail participants have increased significantly. And I call this as one of the inclusion, financial inclusion. Also, this is kind of self-entrepreneurship. So now mostly everybody see capital market as their second business. And people who are at home, individuals also, this is a work from home for them. Actually, investing money, trading, day trading, and a lot of other stuff. And especially we can see a lot of participation from women also. Females at home have also, trained themselves to do, trading. So this is, I can tell, one of the significant financial inclusion that has happened here in India.
I think you can tie it up with two things. One being the Har Ghar Lakpati Didi, right? Which essentially with digital services, you now have access. This was also seen in places like in Egypt, etc., where a lot of women were housewives, were not necessarily employed. Once they started getting access, and Southeast Asia as well, to mobile services, they could then do small businesses and be able to access a market without necessarily needing to be physically outside, right? So that had a big influence in financial inclusion there. And also from an India perspective, I think I was attending a session with ONDC earlier, the conversation from credit being your, first is banking, basic banking access. Step 2 is credit access in terms of inclusion. Third becomes insurance in parallel potentially, but that's your next need. And last is wealth, which also is an important element for financial inclusion, because the biggest problem globally, if you can think about, one of the biggest problems, let's put it that way, socially, is the increasing wealth gap, right? And the reason is not too many people at, say, the lower end of the economy or with lesser means are being given the opportunities to grow their wealth. So having systems of product built for wealth development, I think is also going to be very important in this space. Jacqueline, how are you seeing that step up? And you mentioned about SMEs who outside of the core manufacturing, especially on the chip side of things, electronic side of things, who were kind of struggling to access certain financial services. How are you seeing that evolve in Taiwan? And in particular, you've done a lot of work as a policymaker, tremendous work there. How have you made those changes in policy to enable this as such?
Actually, in Taiwan, industries like semiconductor and ICT, people maybe view Taiwan as most of the companies that huge and big, but actually in Taiwan, 98% are SME. 98% are SME, and we have very so-called great support from government to support SME. So we have specific so-called bank called Taiwan Business Bank, which is support. The main so-called mission of the Taiwan Business Bank is support SME. And government also have a lot of policies to so-called provide subsidy and provide financial support to so-called the micro business in Taiwan. That because 98% are SME, so that means those big companies are coming from SME. So that's we truly believe in Taiwan. Our government have quite a few policies to support SME. But regarding so-called the fintech, I think fintech really solve the problems about the credit, and especially for when there's open banking, so people can share, among the banks, they can share some information that would help a lot because, for SME, they don't need to do the KYC in different bank.
Yeah.
So as long as you have good credit, and then maybe that would be easier for them to get sort of the financial support, financial service from the bank in addition to Taiwan Business Bank. So for those sort of the more commercial FI, they can, based on the so-called the open data to provide more concrete credit to support SME.
Yeah, thanks. Sajjan, you mentioned about how in Nepal you now have 60% banking penetration, better than the peers, relative peers. But how why do you think, where did Nepal do well as compared to the peers to reach that stage? But secondly also is how are you going to take that step from 60% to 80 to 100, right? I'll say 2.0 maybe is 80 and then 3.0 is 100%, but what would be the pathway to that?
So I think the way Nepal achieved that, this is my guess, I would say. There's a couple of events that triggered that is, as I mentioned during our discussion earlier, is Nepal is largely a remittance-driven economy.
Sure.
So 30% of our GDP is fueled by members of our society living abroad and sending money home. So oftentimes when that first paycheck comes in Saudi Arabia and that gets transferred to Nepal, the wife, the kids, they don't go and buy a rice cooker, they actually go buy a smartphone. So what that does is that really escalates and fast tracks the technology adoption in the country, right? So if you look at the last 3 years' data, we've had almost tenfold growth in terms of QR code penetration in the country, and mobile phone was in the last similar period grew by almost double. So all of those were triggered by those subtle socio-economic factors that are taking place in the country. And when that happens, obviously banking is the first place to go. The wallet companies have played a pivotal role in Nepal because up to 5,000 rupees, they can open a wallet without having to have a bank account, and they actually don't need to do a KYC. So that rule, while it's being changed as we speak, that also fueled that adoption towards financial technology in Nepal. Now, where we see going forward from this step is, like I said, it needs to come to a level where it's beyond just owning that bank account, right? So how can you solve the personalized issues that people may have? So a banking requirement, a financial requirement for a beneficiary of somebody who works in Saudi or Qatar, the requirement for that person might be very different than a middle-aged man getting a stable salary at a company in Nepal, right? So that is where I think the fintechs play a pivotal role in identifying those gaps and catering value-added services in the form of different products and services that our wallets and different PSPs and PSOs are doing. So I think if they are able to touch on the day-to-day lives of people, I think that's going to grow that number further up.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key elements is about how much the tiered approach for regulation. So in quite a few cases, when you look at wallets, KYC is very important, but in certain instances, regulators have said, okay, up to a certain amount, say 5,000 rupees or 10,000 rupees, depending on the local currency, you don't need KYC because that's not too much of a pain from an AML perspective. But if you're going to have a greater number than that on a monthly basis, a cumulative basis, then you need to do KYC, right? What we saw in Hong Kong was, as I mentioned, retail was fairly well penetrated, but from a B2B perspective, HKMA launched one of the first regimes for virtual banks, which were full licensed banks, but only digital. But the key element for that was to ensure you have better financial services for SMEs and for small businesses. And it brought down a lot of charges that, I'm going to call them physical banks, but your high street banks were charging from zero balance fees to a bunch of other things and access. And it became competitive for even the retail market because of this change that a regulator brought in. So I think that's a key element. And I want to build from there in terms of we've had this. Mannoj, you touched upon what you've done in Paris with the UPI connectivity. And I think cross-border is going to be a very important element, and everybody now is talking about it, especially in countries where, I'm going to talk about India, Taiwan, and looking at Nepal as well, where there's a significant remittance or an export focus, right, in the region. There's quite a bit of element of cross-border for financial inclusion. Besides what you've done in France, what else do you think is feasible, or what could be built by yourselves as Lyra, or if you're building something, and otherwise for financial inclusion, both for SMEs and individuals in the coming years, from a cross-border perspective?
Yeah. So I will give you some example of the implementation that we have done in France. So the key difference of UPI acceptance here in India, in France is different. In India, you see static QR code all over at the retail places, but that is not the same scenario in France. The market is very different. All the retail outlets are digitally enabled, and all of them have the billing system integrated with them. So they do not enter the amount, so it is already, the amount is already there with the billing system. So this is the key difference in the market there. So when we were trying to implement UPI there, so static was not the solution, so we implemented a dynamic QR solution there, starting with that. But when in India, when the QR was done, since there was no billing system with the retail outlets, with the SMEs, it was static, low cost, a sticker was there, and you can start doing the transaction. So this is the key difference. So from this perspective, if you see, so if we enable our retailers with digital tools, digital billing system, then this can enable more financial inclusion, more discipline, more availability of data. This will then help the next level of financial inclusion, especially in the retail segment, the smaller merchant segment. This is key to the next level of financial inclusion. So whenever there is, so India is a different market, France is a different market, and every market has their own, challenges. So mostly on the remittance side, what we see, in India, the fund movement is easy, but only the fund movement from India to outside is very difficult. In is very easy. So this is straightforward. But outside, there are a lot of compliance challenges. So unless we solve that, we cannot do much. This is what I would say.
Thank you. Jacqueline, how are you seeing the use of technology for cross-border financial inclusion, especially for the exporters or importers in Taiwan? Right?
There's one example. Maybe I can starting with this
Sure,
subject. In Taiwan, young generation, they are not use the security house, local security house. They will use so-called like a first trade, like eToro, which are
Sure.
Online security house.
Yeah, so here we have Zerodha as an example of Grow and others.
They are not registered in Taiwan. They are not lending in Taiwan. They don't have any operation in Taiwan, but the users in Taiwan. So our government facing, how to stop them. It just can't unless you so-called have a site blocking or IP blocking. Otherwise, you can't. But countries like Taiwan, our people, we don't like someone restrict on our using of internet. So that's the cases happening. So I would say in the future for financial services, the borderline will disappear. So how to define so-called the financial inclusion? Maybe not just in one country. So maybe in the future, for example, like people in this room, we are use Apple, Google, Facebook, all kinds of social media, right? So I have Line Pay, Apple Pay, all kinds of pays, right? So whether they have to so-called lending or register in different countries, I think it's a challenge to the regulators, but also challenges to industry players. because you are no more, in the previous time, financial industries is highly regulated. So to some extent, you are protected by the local law.
Yeah.
But in the future, I think that kind of protection will be, challenging. So, Saji and we are forming Asia FinTech Alliance. So currently we have 14 member shareholders. So one of the mission of us is, we are trying to link up, that so-called the practice in this region. So we have, now we have Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, Philippines, in Vietnam, in Nepal, and India, and total currently 14 member association. So we wish we can so-called coordinate and cooperate among the member association to come out the best practice, and not just for industries, but also for government regulators. Yeah. Because, those so-called risks caused by new tech, supposedly similar. So regulations on those risks supposedly should be similar, right? So in the future, we are seeking, maybe there is a harmonization of regulation. So once you get the approval in Japan or in Nepal, and maybe that will be easier in our AFA member countries. Yeah. So that's what we are trying to do. Some maybe say it's mission not that easy, but everything impossible until make it done. Okay.
As Adidas says, nothing is impossible. I think the key theme from what Jacqueline was also mentioning is, as you look at an interconnected world, maybe more so there's the world of globalization in 2000s and 2010s, which is more physical, trade, etc. But the last 10 years in particular with smartphone and internet accessibility, and I'm sure Sachin can talk about how the smartphone penetration in Nepal is over 100%, which you see in a lot of Southeast Asian countries as well, where they're close to 80 to 100% smartphone penetration, but banking is 50%. But harmonization, because you can no longer, IP blocking, etc., can work to a certain extent, but people are still able to connect, access. There have been issues where people from India signed up for websites overseas, and then they lost their money and they could not recover because Indian regulators don't have any access to it, right? So harmonization of regulations and rules, I think, will be very helpful, but also tying up ways of developing best practices to ensure that the cross-border linkages or applications can work better. So if you are enabling something in Nepal, it could be used in some other place, but the fintechs can connect and the regulators have better oversight. So coming to you, as I mentioned, right, love to hear the story of why as you mentioned, why we have high smartphone penetration, but what's been that impact for financial inclusion in Nepal, plus the whole conversation around how do we use technology for the next phase. Yeah.
So on the topic of cross-border, the way I see it is, again, coming from Nepal's vantage point, we are, again, very remittance-dependent country. So far, the reason for moving money has been, from a tech perspective, we're only solving the movement of money part, right? Mm. But if you really go to the bottom of it, why do people send money to their loved ones back home? It's actually for a certain business purpose, right? They're trying to fulfill that product or services requirement, right? So if you understand that, the way I see the future evolving with fintechs is not solving the movement of money part, but solving that business problem by maybe giving that access to somebody working abroad to pay their kids' school fees directly from their bank account living abroad, right? And if you go down that path, there are so many business requirements that are currently on the table that are not solved. So what they end up doing is they do that once a month, $2,000 transaction remittance, and that 2,000 then gets trickled down into multiple different transactions back home, right? So if you're able to solve that problem from a cross-border perspective, for that, a lot of regulatory liaising is going to be required. The forms of, for example, doing KYC formalities of Nepal versus that third country needs to be on the same page. There needs to be a tight relationship between the regulators to prevent fraudulent transactions and whatnot. So,
Correct.
but that is where I think the next round of investments is required, is establishing that infrastructure. For example, India has done excellent with the NPCI of the likes, building that rails internally. And now I know NPCI is going outside. They've actually signed an MOU with Nepal as well, NCHL. Yeah. So while these infrastructures are being built, people like us in the fintech world need to start identifying those business problems that we can solve seamlessly. And I think that's going to be the next boost in terms of cross-border. So I'm not going to call it cross-border payments. It's actually going to be cross-border banking, right? So
digital financial services.
Exactly.
Yeah. And Sarjan touched upon that need when in a lot of remittance-focused countries, when you're sending money home, the person sending money home, they may have their families back here, they may be very young people, and when you send money, right, people may misuse it. You know, if it's a young student, may go to a party, go to a movie or whatever. Not that they shouldn't, but may end up spending more than rather than paying their fees. So we've seen some instances in East Asia, in Philippines, certain fintechs have been set up in a way that you as the person who's sending the remittance can use an app, and maybe it's a coupon, or you can just go buy on, say, you know, Swiggy or Flipkart or Amazon, and then you're getting that groceries delivered to your place, or you're paying for the fees, and that's being allowed by Philippines. I think that could be a model that could be replicated. As we come towards the last 5 minutes of our session, thank you for bearing with us as the evening heads further. I want to ask each of you, and I know this wasn't in the question list, so this is more so, one or two emerging technologies, or you know, in some cases, established technology, which you feel will have the biggest impact on financial inclusion in, say, the next 5-year horizon. I'm not going too deep because I think we have too much development in technology and rapid, but one if you want to pick. So, Jacqueline, I know you have certain thoughts on a certain technology, so I'll start with you on your view on this.
Of course, I think AI, personalized, there will be change in substance of the current financial services models, and also blockchain. Sure. And I truly believe, you know, you just cannot stop, no matter you like or not. Cryptocurrency, digital asset will be the future, because, you know, they are getting more and more people. They are not just play in the virtual world. They also work there. They also do business there. So in virtual world, there is borderless, right? So it is just doesn't make sense for them to use fiat in those virtual world. So digital currency, digital assets in the future will be popular in the virtual world, especially for the young generation. So blockchain, crypto, digital asset, and AI will change financial services in substance.
Thank you. Manoj, your views on the technologies?
Yeah. So I will not say AI, because I know everybody will not normally nowadays will talk about AI. So for me, you know, biometrics is one of the key factor. You know, biometric authentication, biometric applications, you know, around biometric, you know, we will actually, you know, even with AI, something is not possible, but with biometrics, you know, mostly we would achieve, you know, what we want to achieve with financial inclusion. So I would see a lot of technologies, a lot of solutions, use cases around biometrics will help, you know, take it to the next level. This is my thought process.
Thank you. Sarjan?
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to say AI. The way AI is going to be used, AI is a broad term, right? So, but the way I see it is, as the financial inclusion equation is being crafted, people are going to join this fabric, but hyper-personalization is where there's money to be made, where there's stickiness can be created with the consumer level, right? So I think that is where AI can play a tremendous role by connecting the dots and the amount of data that is being generated. If you can fulfill your business requirements, personal requirements, lifestyle requirements without thinking about money at the backdrop. If that is automatically, done through AI and the data and all of that, I think that is where the future is headed. And finance will be reduced down to a ledger balance being maintained at some back office system with the debit and credit. And as long as you have money to spend, your needs are being fulfilled without having to think about pushing that pay button, for instance, right? So I think that's where the AI is going to play a pivotal role.
You think it and you pay it, right? At the same time. For me personally, these are very important technologies, but one that remains a challenge is, especially in countries where mobile penetration, at least smartphone penetration, not 100%, is offline payments and technology for enabling that, right? It's not just a question of access, but it's also remote areas in many countries where you don't have network all the time. Forget remote areas, a lot of us have struggled with network in our urban cities. So I think offline payments is going to be quite important. I know RBI has been looking at it from a CBDC perspective as well, or UPI payments as well when you look at offline payments. So offline to online, when that disconnect happens, bridging that, it's a short-term thing for the next 3 to 5 years, but I think it's still going to be a critical element of that. Our time's up. We've had a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much to Mannoj, Jacqueline, and Sajan for their insights, and thank you, audience, for having the patience for sitting through this. Thank you very much to GFF. Thank you.
Do you want to take any questions? Anybody? Do you have any question for our panel? All right. Let's picture time. It is group photo time.